Order. Can we get a roll call, please?
Chair Burning,
Present.
Vice Chair Counter,
Present.
Supervisor Shirley,
Present.
Supervisor Long,
Present.
Supervisor Fiedler.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Approval of minutes. Is there any amendments to the minutes? Calling for any amendments to the minutes. Hearing none. Those stand approved. Public comment. Are there any members of the public that want to have a comment? Public comment? Any public comment? All right. Seeing none, we'll move on to the business items of the agenda. We'll go to the financial report for May of 2024. Administrator Witt.
Yeah, the May financial report is in the packet. I primarily want to take a look at the end reports. There we go. So again, to look at vehicle registration, so you can see that number continuing to go up as the implementation now hit a full month's worth of collection on the vehicle registration fee. And although we had a low month for February, March bounced back for sales tax. So much for my recession call there. But so 1.2, that's more in line than we've had some numbers that large before, but it's in line with where we'd expect to see the numbers sort of ranging. February is just abnormally low. And that's all I really had to point out. I'd be happy to entertain any other questions that you had, though.
Are there any questions for the administrator? Supervisor Counter?
Just had one on the IT area.
Sure.
You had some pretty big red numbers there for a couple of things, and one that wasn't really identified very much.
Yeah.
Um,
Like the 10,000.
yeah.
The 10,000% negative number
Yeah.
on managed IT print costs. So what we do is we build up all of the expenses on this line item, and then they bill that back out to the other departments. And so he's way over budget, but he's going to charge it back to everyone else where it is budgeted on the other ones. So that's managed IT print. Employee other expense, that's really, it's $1,600 versus a $300 budget, so that's over by 464%. So that could be just a coding issue. They use that line item. That's actually our default when you use the credit card. If you don't pick something else, that's default. So somebody probably didn't really classify that probably where it should have been. And those are the two big ones. Any others that you saw in there?
That was the questions.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for the administrator? Any other questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to number 2. Review of health care campus financials versus Whipfly projections pre-2016 construction. I'll turn it over to Administrator Witt.
Yeah, I think this is a good exercise to sort of look back and see how close we were when we originally projected the healthcare campus, the nursing home. So in 2015, prior to building, we'd contracted with Whipfly. They'd provided a 5-year projection, so 2016 through 2020. And then I just extrapolated out the trend lines that they were using to make comparisons for 21, 22, and 23. We then went back and looked at the actual line items on the bottom half of the page then to see how close we were. So basically what Whipfly had projected was that we would cash flow enough that we'd be able to have about $500,000 available for debt service payments, because the debt service was taken out as a general revenue bond, which means the general taxpayers are responsible for it, not tied actually directly to the healthcare build. But they should be able to at least pay for part of it, and that was the estimation. And actually looking at the trend line, it's kind of unusual they didn't go out further. They had really projected that the employee benefits would go a lot higher than what we've experienced, and that was probably a negative effect going out, that they didn't continue on that trend line. But looking at our actuals then, my mouse is frozen here, here we go. All right, so looking at our actuals then, so we've been a little bit behind to begin with. And then we had a really good year in 2018, and then it kind of crashed about the time that COVID hit. 21, while the bottom number is really good, that's a lot of COVID extra payments that came in that year that added to that bottom line. And you know, overall, if we really look, though, if you add up all the years and take out all the ups and downs, we're probably actually ahead of where Whitfleet would have projected we should have been. So we've generated enough cash flow that, yes, on paper, they should be able to start contributing towards the debt service. So why haven't they? Well, they really started with a huge negative balance. Now, the fund balance that you're seeing there in that colored chart is representative of their, not the cash flow, but it's representative of the book value. So the difference between the two is depreciation and amortization of WRS benefits. Those are the two non-cash book items that hit the balance sheet. So both highway and the healthcare campus are enterprise funds, which means we treat them just like a private business would. And so a private business would take the $20 million building, depreciate it over 27.5 years, and have a negative amount every year. So that's what we do because that's the generally accepted accounting practice for an enterprise fund. But it also lends to a negative book balance every year. Whereas their cash flow, what this was based upon, has a positive balance. So their fund balance has gone into the positive, and it's unfortunate the attachment there covered up the last two blue lines because it continues to come up there. It's still not quite to the 10% yet where what our fund balance policy calls for this fund, but it has turned positive. And that was all done without subsidizing the nursing home. So prior to 2011, when they turned negative, these positive blue balances, I can tell you that the county was subsidizing the nursing home with tax levy dollars. And so I know when Pat Thompson started, he stopped subsidizing them. They fell into a deep negative. And then through their own well management, they've been able to pull themselves back out of that negative amount. When we would start using the surplus then to pay off debt service would be, my recommendation would have been when they hit that 10% line on the fund balance. And they're probably maybe 2-3 years from hitting that amount. But anything over that, just like we do with the general fund, when you're over your fund balance amount, then you can pull that off and use it for other sources. So I mean, big picture, that's kind of where we're at. Where do your questions fall in this analysis?
Are there any questions for the administrator?
Oh, I'm sure.
Okay, Supervisor Counter?
Well, with all this said, one of the things too is that the one section isn't even being occupied or being used, so that's kind of been sitting in mothballs yet. So we're currently doing this financially without even that section being used, if I'm understanding what you're saying.
Yep, correct. So the 10-bed Kitty Roads memory care section is currently unused. It's completely empty in there. I think they're using it for storage. So that space is unused. So those are beds. That's missed opportunity. Those are beds that could be filled if we could get enough CNA staff to actually fill it. That's really been our handicap on the facility, is having enough staff to cover all of the beds that we have and to fill.
I spoke with Sandy today or yesterday, and she said that they stopped all contract work as of last week or the week before because they are fully staffed with CNAs for current beds that are so. And it really is due to, because school's out, they have a lot of high school workers, so more availability for the scheduling. So maybe a little presumptuous to say, well, now we can start opening Kitty Roads beds because the scheduling may, in the fall, go back to where they need contract workers again. But we are making progress. I think at the next town hall on Wednesday, we had like 30 new employees for the healthcare campus in the last 3 months. So it's a work in progress.
Any other questions for the administrator? Supervisor Long?
So it's my understanding that the debt service payments are about 1.5 million per year?
Yeah, the current year debt payment is 1.5 million. We have approximately 10, 11 years left on the payments. They slowly escalate up to about 2 million in the last year. Current principal balance outstanding is about 15 million. We've only paid off about 25% of it in the first nine years on the 20-year bond.
So if, my understanding is that even though the health camp is not having impact on the operating levy, that 1.5 million of debt service is being paid by all the taxpayers of the county.
Yeah, and I make sure that I'm pretty clear anytime we talk about the healthcare campus and the financial position of it, on cash flow basis, they are covering their operating expenses. They do not generate enough revenue to cover the debt service. The general taxpayers are covering the debt service on the building.
So I guess the question would be, since my understanding is, generally speaking, the population of the census in the healthcare campus is generally from the New Richmond general area, Somerset, Roberts.
Yeah, I talked to the nursing home administrator about that last week to get a feel for where they are. And while we don't have a specific number, the general feel is that it's really regional for that part of the county. That's where they draw from.
So I guess
Because there are other facilities, private facilities located elsewhere around the county. And generally, people like to have their loved ones as close as possible. And so it isn't something that somebody normally travels all the way across the county to go to the county facility. They'll find the nearest facility. So it's more convenient to visit. That's probably more important in the long run for them.
So I guess my question to the committee is, what's our comfort level in the fact that the probably 80% of the taxpayers of the county are paying the debt service of 1.5 million, although they're not taking advantage of the facility. In other words, the vast majority of the taxpayers are supporting a facility that they're not getting any advantage out of. And so my question to the committee is, how comfortable are we in that scenario, given this isn't a mandated service? I know it's a hard question, but I'm interested in your perspective.
All right, Supervisor Long has proposed a question to the committee, and we'll open it up if somebody wants to respond to his question. Supervisor Counter?
Well, being a person, I guess I'm from that's my district area number one. So, but being from that area, I can attest that I've known many people that have went through that facility and when they've had very difficult times, and the care and support and the people that have been there have been exceptional, and that would be in the lowest terms I would put it. There's the care level and the things is above and beyond what, and I've had to deal with ones that have also been in, I'm trying to think of the name of it, in Hudson, down across from the post office. But anyway, I'm not, I shouldn't even have said that much. But anyway, there have been, being that the type of facility is and the care level that's been there and that they are making things work has been very positive. The second thing I want to bring up too is that this question was posed to the county board, and it was very contentious when it was. And it was brought to a referendum, a non-binding referendum, and the county as a whole voted that they wanted to retain our nursing home. And that's why the investment was placed in it, to do it in the first place. So, and I would also question if they're only drawing from 20% of the entire county in that area, because I'm thinking you're thinking more the terms of the city of New Richmond, but they do also pull from Somerset, Star Prairie, Deer Park, that whole northern half comes there. So it isn't just the city of New Richmond. So 20% may be that may be a little bit low. I wouldn't be able to give you an exact number to contest what that number would be, but I think it's a little bit higher than that. So I guess that's my input on it. Thank you.
Any other feedback? Supervisor Shirley?
When we look through these numbers that are on the board there above, on our actuals, I think it's important the rest of the committee understands that the available income for debt service, that last line item, does not account for accrued expenses. So if you look just at, say, 2021, our actual expenses, instead of 6.4, when we look at our budget book, is 6.8. So, while it looks good that, 871, the actual real dollars are 348,000. So those numbers are a little on the high side if you take out all those accrued. So it's something to think about when we're going through numbers, and it looks better here than it really is.
Any further discussion on this item?
Mr. Chair, this is Bob Fiedler.
Yes, Mr. Fiedler, go ahead.
Perhaps I could, I don't have an answer to Supervisor Long's question, but maybe I could ask Administrator Witt, what are the alternatives to the way we currently fund it?
Yeah, well, I think Chair Long's point is this a venture that the county wants to be in still? Because the other alternative is you can sell the facility. There's been a number of them across Wisconsin where the counties have sold off their facilities. I think Sauk County just listed theirs within the last month or two. So it's a decision that the county board ultimately has to make of whether this is something that they want to continue doing. Because that's your alternative is to sell it and turn it over for private operation.
Just make
follow
a
up on
comment.
that.
Go ahead, Supervisor Fiedler.
I was just going to follow up on what the administrator said. Okay, let's just say we were to sell it. Does he expect that we would get anywhere near the amount that would be required to pay off the debt service, or how would that work?
I don't believe you would recoup 15 million on the sale. You're going to recoup something less than that. I believe that we're currently underwater on the value of it. But I had mentioned that when we borrowed the money on it, we took it out as a general obligation, not as a revenue bond. So the bonding actually isn't tied directly to the payment. It's not like your house. If you sell your house, you can't just sell the house, keep the money, and keep making the mortgage payments. You have to pay the mortgage off. That is not the case here. It's more like a personal loan. And so we took out a personal loan for $20 million, and we happened to build the nursing home with it. But the two are not directly linked together. So if you were to sell it, whatever assets we recouped, we could use to avoid a future borrowing. So we have two borrowings coming up on our books, one in 2025 and in 2027 we're going to get to it in the capital projects, but for the highway shop, $7.5 million facility we're looking at building next year, and then in 2027 jail expansion, which is north of $50 million. So those are two borrowings where any monies that you did receive could be used to offset that borrowing cost. Really, you've already borrowed for it. You'd just be recouping some of it to use for a different project.
Thank you.
Supervisor Long?
Yeah, and I don't want anybody to get the wrong impression. I don't want anybody to think that, we're not giving good service or anything of that. I'm strictly looking at this from a financial standpoint, particularly because we have some significant capital projects coming down the pike. So it's kind of our job to be visionary, if you will. And I think it would be worthy to at least explore that possibility. And certainly not, you know, I give everybody working there all the credit in the world. I think Sandy's done a fabulous job. I give her a lot of credit. And I don't want to give the wrong impression, but I'm looking at this strictly from a financial standpoint, long-term financial standpoint, that I think that it would at least be worthwhile to look into that option and that possibility. And we may find that, no, that's a really dumb idea, and they wouldn't do it. But I think it's worth at least investigating that option. And to that extent, I would even suggest, I'm not a fan of subcommittees, so maybe a smaller group of maybe an admin chair and myself as the board chair and county administrator could at least spend a little time and take a look at it. And because the more I look at it, I guess the more questions I have. And I want to make sure that I feel comfortable that, yeah, we're comfortable moving forward in the county sponsoring the health campus. And I think that would be a worthwhile exercise.
Any other questions or comments? Administrator Witt?
Yeah, I did want to make sure that we do recognize the job that Sandy Hackenmuller has done. If you look at this financial report, it looks pretty good. I mean, from a cash flow standpoint, they are generating a positive cash flow. And they're doing that because Sandy does an excellent job of managing staff to beds filled. And so that takes a lot of management to make sure those numbers are matching up and paying attention to the details. And she does that, and she's done a great job with that. Looking back where we were 10 years ago when we did the advisory referendum, and it was just before I got here, but I think that facility was very outdated. I mean, it was a very old facility. It had a very institutional feel. And so the voters voted at that point in time to, you know, redo the facility and bring it up to a modern standard. And so it is. It's a beautiful facility. But what's different now is that if you sell it, you're not selling an old institutional facility that a private business is going to take over. You're selling a very modern, beautiful facility that's still going to be that facility if somebody took it over. And so there is a little bit of a difference between what happened 10 years ago and where we are today.
Do you happen to know what the date was of that referendum? That's what I was trying to look up.
It was 2014 or maybe early 2015. I don't recall the exact date. I think John would be the only one in this room that was here then.
We opened in October of 16, so I'm guessing early 2015.
Yeah, it's like 14 or 15.
Yep.
Okay, we'll look that up. I don't remember what the wording of that referendum was. I mean, I vaguely do, but I'm not going to quote it without having it in black and white. So, are there any other questions, concerns, comments, ideas? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to number 3, review of capital improvement projects.
I did make a suggestion.
So, Administrator Witt, if you'll take it from here.
Yeah, I did, by the request of Chair Long, there are paper copies in front of you that you can maybe actually read. 'Cause I can't even read it on the screen here. I'm gonna make it a little bigger. So the ones highlighted in yellow are of the jurisdiction of this committee. So it's basically facilities, IT. That's what we're looking at here. So you're getting just the departments that report directly to the administration committee. That's what we're reviewing here today for feedback. At the end of July, We'll have the committee of the whole meeting, that's our paddle meeting, where we get to go through the entire KIP and vote on everything. It'll then come back in August as a resolution for adoption, September county board adoption. It's then included within the budget, and the budget's adopted in November. So I'm not going to go over in any detail the ones that are highlighted that are all in black lettering. Those are the same as they were last year. You can look at the stuff that's coming up for next year. We do have a solar array in Baldwin coming up. The ones with the red project numbers, starting at the bottom of that first page, those are new projects that are added to it. So you have not seen these before. Generally, I like them to start at the end, but sometimes things come up that, we place them in a different spot. So two of them are the Government Center Clinic. And I don't know where Chris is getting this number, but he's saying 1.2 million for the Government Center clinic build out. This would be an on-site clinic. We have the space, so the space is shelled out with this construction project. This would be the finishing of that space. It's about 2,000 square feet. So if you figure that out, that's, everything's gold plated in there, I think. But we really think we can come in well under budget on this. I think even Chris has lowered his projection by several $100,000 on this. But the Government Center Clinic ties into a lot of the health insurance things that we started talking about last month. We're going to talk about more next month. But it's a way that we're trying to get a hold of our health insurance costs in the long term. So that's why that's important. We have a grand courtroom, so a few years out, but upstairs in the 4 courtrooms that are being vacated as the judges are all going to move downstairs. The court commissioners are going to take over 2 of those in the short term, but we wanted to create one grand courtroom, which basically just has more seating and more capacity. So if you have like a MU trial, you have more capacity for a trial like that. So that's what that money is for. The CT scanner that we have out at the DD building in the medical examiner's office, we found out it doesn't like power surges the hard way. So the $145,000 is to put in basically a battery protection so it doesn't fluctuate in a power outage. The medical examiner has a long-term plan with the DD building of building out an autopsy suite. So we have that a few years out. But then what you would be able to do is instead of sending the bodies over to Ramsey County to be autopsied, we'd bring the forensic pathologist here and they would do the autopsies on site for us. You could also rent the space out then, so somebody from Polk County, instead of, because they should send their bodies to Ramsey also, they could send the body here, they could do the autopsy here, we could lease out the space. So it could actually be a revenue generator for us. And then some OV electrical transformers. If you've seen the movie, you know what those are. The IT projects that we have, everything on there have been things that you've seen before. They're all data and storage and cameras and copy machines, things like that. Election software and server update, we put that out 5 years. That's going to be a recurring thing that you see every 5 to 7 years on the plan. And then I think we had some vehicles, and that should be it. I think we missed highlighting the vehicles. Somewhere on there is vehicles.
Mr. Chair, this is Bob. Could I ask the administrator a question?
Yes.
I believe it was item 10,000, the sheriff's fleet cars. And I believe he purchases them every 3 years. Is there an alternative there for leasing that you might suggest, or is the purchase the best way to go?
Yeah, you're not gonna save any money on leasing. There was actually, so Enterprise is who we lease through. We've looked into this. So leasing of the vehicles is an operational expense. Purchasing of the vehicles is a capital expense. So if you end up having to borrow for it, you can borrow to buy a squad car. You can't borrow to pay for a lease. So there would be a cost shift there, which would be detrimental to our revenue limits. The other thing is, and now Enterprise did change their mind, but up until 2 years ago, they would not lease a pursuit vehicle. So if it was going to be in high-speed pursuits, that was not a lease option. They have actually changed their mind and they have offered that to us, but the hindrance of it changing from a capital expense to an operational expense was detrimental. And the total cost, really at the end of the day, since they're on a 3-year rotation, really doesn't change very much. We purchase the vehicles, we use them hard for 3 years, we sell them at about 80 to 100,000 miles, 3 years old. We're getting the best return that we really can on those vehicles. So that's where we're at.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for Administrator Witt? Supervisor Long?
I have several questions. Can I back up to project 10107 for $400,000 a solar array? So that's listed as necessity. Can you explain that, please?
Necessity, huh? Huh, look at that. So I would probably classify that as an enhancement. What I can tell you, though, about solar is the IRS changed their rules starting this year in 2024. So the county would be available for any tax credits just like a private business, which is right now 30% of the cost of a project. So we can actually, I know we don't pay taxes like a business does, but we'll actually get a cash payment from the federal government. There's a process for that. So we can recoup a third of the cost through this new IRS rule that was put into place. With that capital cost and the reduction, we're going to change our payback periods from about 20 years down to probably 10 to 15 years. We're also looking at some different grant opportunities that would further bring that down. So if we can get those grant opportunities, we can bring that down potentially to 5 years. And really at that point in time, it's a no-brainer that we would want to do solar arrays wherever we can on government facilities. Because that'll reduce our operational costs. So the savings is on the operational side, which I just said, that's where I struggle, is on the operation side. So if you can do a capital investment to save operation money, that's a really good thing for us.
So is this kind of like a test? See how it works?
Yeah, well, we're looking at it in a couple of different areas. We're looking at it here, and Baldwin is a great test location. It's smaller, but we'll be able to do it. We'll be able to find out where the tweaks are, make sure the federal government actually honors their commitment, and I can get that money from them. But that's a great test for us to do. And then we want to come back and we want to do the government center, we want to do the highway shop, we want to do other locations if it works out.
I've got more, sorry. Can I keep going? So the, as far as the clinic, I think I would say let's leave that on there for right now, because I think we'll have a little better discussion of that when we talk more in detail about the health insurance. And
Yeah.
I was kind of curious, let's see, so I have to stay in the yellow sections? I can't ask questions about the rest?
Well, you're the county board chair. You can really do whatever you want, but the intent of the meeting was to stay in the yellow.
Okay, well, I will just mention then, you don't have to even respond, but I'm quite concerned about spending millions of dollars for the Eckerd Blufflands Park. That's a want, not necessarily a need. And when we look at the the borrowing that's going to be required for the new highway facility as well as the jail in a couple of years. A couple of $100 million per year for a new park is a really nice thing to have, but I think we need to be very careful about that.
Yeah, and I did list that one as an enhancement, but that committee has not reviewed that yet, so it would be premature for me to give any other feedback on it.
Are there any other questions for Administrator Witt on the capital improvement projects?
I would just point out the very bottom then, what you're looking at there. So in 2025, we'd be looking at 13.5 million in total projects. So about $10 million in borrowing is what I would recommend. We really can afford about 3 million usually on average of cash. And then anything over that would require borrowing. So we're looking at a borrowing of 10 million in 2025 and north of 50 million in 2027 because that jail expansion is going to be out there. And again, you'll see a lot more of that at the Committee of the Whole. So just at the bottom, what we're looking at in the implications. So timing-wise from that, what I'm planning on doing is, so we get all through budget adoption in November, and I know that $13 million of projects are approved. I don't have the cash for that. So I will come back with an initial authorizing resolution for a bond issue in December. That'll be the one that requires a 3/4 vote of all county board supervisors. So it has to have 15 yes votes. If somebody's absent, they count as a no. So I have to have 15 yes votes for that resolution. That's good for 5 years then, up to that dollar amount that you've set in that. What I want to do, when we did the government center project, we rushed to do the bond issue because rates were just starting to go up. You could still get a 3% mortgage when we got the government center bonds. Right now, mortgage rates are higher, which correlates a little bit to our bonds. So I want to actually stall the actual bond sale until we finish the engineering for the highway shop and bid it out, and we have the actual dollar amount, because then I can scale down the bond issue also if we get good bids. But it'll delay the sale of the bonds, and I only need a majority vote of the county board to sell the bonds after that initial bonding resolution. So we'll do the initial bonding in December of '24, and we'll do probably the actual sale. It could be the winter, early 2026, before we would do the actual sale of the bonds. Just so you understand the timing of what my plan is for the bond sale.
Supervisor Counter?
With these two, the 2025 and 2027 potential for bonding and stuff, would you be able to put together a impact of how that will impact for the, as far as for the taxpayers and stuff, so we can at least have a little bit of information up front to help us as we're trying to calculate all this and be able to sell this?
Yep, absolutely.
Any other questions, comments? Okay, are you looking for, we're just reviewing, giving you feedback, no motions?
Yep, just reviewing, no motions tonight.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that you start to get an understanding of all the projects on there, and then you'll see it again in July then.
Okay, excellent. All right, so with that, we'll move on to number 4, Performance Recognition Program Analysis and Recommendations. Administrator Witt.
Yeah, I'll actually turn this over to Audrey. She's the one that did most of the work, even though it was assigned to me. So she'll go over this.
Which shows our performance plan is working. We assign goals, we complete them. So this, we did put quite a bit of work into this. I researched lots of different programs. We talked to anywhere from staff advisory, leadership, department heads, had a lot of conversations, learned a lot about programs that I didn't even know were happening at a department level. So little things that are going on to promote performance recognition not just at a countywide level, but also at a department or even individual specific level. So throughout those conversations, there was a lot of mixed opinions, trying to figure out like what type of program would work the best. So I tried to summarize it as best as I could in the notes. But overall, I think the synopsis was there really isn't a one-size-fits-all solution to create to create a recognition program for the county as a whole. We think it's a little bit better to just support the departments in the ventures that they're already working on and provide new ideas to them, and then to also continue on with what we have in place already. So I do think that some of our countywide programs are working like they should. Our promotional opportunities, which is, I think, supportive of those who are high performers, right? We recognize those individuals by promoting them into different positions. We had 55 promotions internally last year alone, which is pretty successful. We also do our annual performance reviews, so that provides a chance for individual feedback, goal creation, recognition that way. There isn't a financial component to that specifically, but it is a chance to verbally, recognize those that kind of go above and beyond, in addition to just the department level recognition that department heads are giving to their individuals, either on a team basis or an individual performance basis. And I think that's the other part too, was not just looking at how do we create individual top performers, but how do we create teams that perform and collaborate well together as well. And sometimes if you focus too much just on that individual performance, it ends up having kind of a back toe on collaboration and teamwork. And so we kind of just had to look at the positives of these programs that are out there, as well as the negatives, and how we thought it would impact the county as a whole to implement a brand new program. And across the board, it was the decision was, we don't know that that's the best idea, especially if we financially incentivize it. That really had some mixed feelings on that part of it. So as stated, just kind of grow the programs we currently have in place, and from an HR standpoint, really try and support those programs, create new ideas for the department heads. They've asked to create a performance recognition page where we could implement new ideas and put links out to programs and things like that to just kind of help them with creating on their end. So question or?
A couple of examples to illustrate what Audrey just said. So like the sheriff's department, very opposed to any financial incentive on performance. He didn't want to be looked at, you write a bunch of tickets, you get a bonus. So, I mean, he was adamant that was not something that he wanted to see the county doing. The IT department, they have a front-facing help desk who sees a lot of people, and they have people that, are working on the server, working behind the scenes that nobody ever knows about. I mean, one may be performing better than the other, but their measurements are so different. Even in that one department, it's hard to recognize who the high performer is, and then to compare them to a CNA, to one of the drivers in highway, to the law enforcement. The job duties we do are very vast and not comparable.
Any questions, Supervisor Counter?
Just had a few on when you're performing the annual counseling for the employees. Do they look at like for lateral or what their next positions would be for promotion, and as they're doing that, and or if that is being done when you're looking at it, then do you look at training potential for them and things that they can go through, and does the county help with any of those types of things to get them through that? And then also, are you looking at all at identifiers where they do a particular thing that they have another duty that they can perform so that if there's an emergency, they can transfer over and be able to, so they can be trained in lateral positions and things like that too.
Yes. Yeah, well, it really is yes to all of that. So, because we have so many promotions, and I think everybody but Anjali, who's filling in for Heather today, so maybe she's a future promotion, was promoted on here. Every last one of us, other than Anjali, so far, has been promoted within the organization. So that just is testament to the development that the county has of our staff. So we have quarterly leadership training where we bring in anyone who's supervising it, any other employees, or some of those positions that are developmentally into other leaders. We do identify trainings. We send employees with our staff training development to continue to build on those skills in other ways. In a lot of our positions, we have number twos. Like Denise was the first deputy in the treasurer's office before she got promoted to treasurer. But that first deputy is a designated position to learn underneath the treasurer and eventually be able to succeed and take over. Same as Dustin, he was the assistant finance director until he became the finance director. So he was trained and groomed and developed to become that promotion opportunity.
Are there any other questions? Yes, Supervisor Shirley?
First of all, I love that we do that many promotions within the county. That I think is a really good thing. I am curious, take the sheriff's department out of it. Are the employees more concerned about a financial thing, or is leadership more concerned?
I would say it was even across the board. Staff advisory is made up mainly of non-supervisory positions, and we ask them to go back to their departments, kind of spread the word, get the feel out for it. The mentality, it seems, is really about equity and fairness, just across the board with the county. I'd say when I look at employee relations issues, that's usually what the issue is. Somebody feels that somebody else is getting better treatment or more favored treatment. And so when you talk about giving people a financial incentive, why is that individual getting it over me? This is just favoritism. Is it really based on performance standards, right? And as Ken had spoken, the positions, not only are the departments so different from each other, but the positions within the department are so different too, that it's maybe a little bit more, John is going to get a lot more feedback from individuals saying, hey, that help desk Chauncey, he's great. He helps me out all the time, versus the guy in the back server room that nobody talks to, but does maybe just as good of a job. So I think creating a fair and performance recognition metric to begin with, and then to express that to all of the employees to show them how it would be fair, it just didn't seem like it was going to go over very well. From an employee and supervisor standpoint, there was a lot of negative feelings about the financial part of that. I know it's a little hard to swallow, because I mean, from an HR standpoint, I thought, well, yeah, that's a great idea. But as we really dove into it, it got more complicated.
Supervisor Long?
Thank you for going through this exercise and analysis. I hope that you found it beneficial overall. I really liked your summary, and I agree with your conclusions. So thank you for doing that. And coming from the private sector, the only place that I kind of get hung up is more of the individual financial component, where someone who meets expectations and someone who exceeds expectations basically gets the same raise. And that's where I've always kind of got hung up, because that was certainly not the case in the private sector. So maybe that's a function of the wage grid. I'm not really quite sure.
It currently is, the wage grid is set up that, and so is our performance review system. We didn't set it up, right, that you can set it up so that your A pluses get, you know, a little bit higher percentage of an increase than maybe the people who are down here scoring on the performance reviews. It would take, and we did look at that, and it would take like a full, you know, reanalyzing of how we do our performance reviews. But we spoke about it with department heads. We spoke about that type of system with supervisors. And once again, it didn't seem like the best path forward, that it would create animosity. Anything, I don't know if it's still just kind of more a union mindset of having so many unions in the past, but everybody seems pretty good with
To that-
being fair and consistent.
Yeah, to that point, equity amongst the employees is important. And if you use just the performance rating system as the tool, you're not going to get equitable distribution amongst the employees. So there'll be department heads out there that say, well, I want all my employees to get the biggest raise possible, so I'm going to rate them all as perfect. And every single person in the department is going to be rated a 10 out of 10 because they want to get them the biggest raise possible. They're not going to do an even distribution.
Yeah, I think the other option there is that every department gets a certain, you know, you're gonna get this amount, and you divvy it up the way
Yep.
you think is appropriate,
Right.
and that gets past that particular
Yep.
issue.
And then the employees are gonna say, well, it was favoritism. The manager gave their favorite employee the extra money, and I didn't get the extra money. You're just gonna create a whole lot of headaches for Audrey. Yeah, so we really looked at every possible scenario, and I think that really the conclusion is government might just be a little bit different than the private sector in this regard.
I do have one thing I want to just add to that, though. There are instances where we've, as elected officials, have fielded phone calls in particular issues where departments have caused friction outside of this world of county government. I'm not going to get into specifics here, but a mechanism that policymakers can help control that is the purse string. Like, we have that power. The wage grid and this kind of stuff makes us almost powerless in that regard. So if there are issues in areas that we see, the way to curb that from a policymaker perspective is to go, well, there's no increase here. Sorry. And that could be from our perspective. I'm not saying we're going to wield it as some sort of, you know, playing favorites with different departments, but in looking at this from our perspective as policymakers, we lose when we get these phone calls and whatever it is, we then feel powerless to do anything because just exactly like you said, well, the department head is going to turn around and just give everyone the maximum raise. I don't find that to be the case. I think our department heads are high quality and are better than that scenario that you guys gave out in that regard. So I think we should take a look at the wage grid, because I think you had said it, Audrey, that maybe it's just the union style of what's always been prior to 10-ish years ago kind of has carried over. I don't know if that needs to be our perspective anymore when delivering services to our constituents, to our neighbors. So, I mean, I think we should take a look at it further and maybe reframe our mindset, and we'll talk about this more offline, you know, when you and I have our meeting. But I think if we could take a look at it from the perspective of really rewarding those that go and get them, because there's like you said, there's some people that are going to sit there and work on a server, and they're going to keep China out of our county government, and that deserves something, because that is not easy to sit there some days and go into a firewall and reset all the patches. I mean, I don't do that for a living. I just tell people to do that for a living. But I know the stress and strain that can cause when those patches don't go right and there's an attack on an infrastructure. So all those different things, I think we can find a way that's better than just what it is today. And I think that's the point of this exercise, was looking at that. So are there any other questions for Audrey? or Ken, or Administrator Witt? Supervisor Shirley?
I guess I would just say that's kind of, that direction was kind of where I was going. But I think that looking at this really shows that there's an overall, maybe larger problem that, especially the wage grid itself, but the department heads and the other leadership supervisor roles know who their high performers are. And if they don't know who their high performers are, then maybe they shouldn't be in those positions. Because they do know who those people are, or they should. So, if we're gonna incentivize our good employees, then we need to make good use of our department leadership.
I'm going to add one thing to what Supervisor Shirley just said too. I think we have it on here today. We do. We're reclassifying positions once again. And I say once again because it's almost every administrative meeting. I know you and I have had this conversation, Audrey, and Administrator Witt, you and I have had this conversation. And it's almost every county board meeting. I say almost, just to cover my own skin on this. This is clearly something that we set it. It's supposed to be a grid. Those grids are supposed to be followed. And now we're having to manipulate it and change it and move it around and move this person from a 67 to a 21 with a 3 with a 17 at the end. I don't know. I don't know that stuff, right? So we're constantly doing this. Whereas if there was a purse of money for the department heads to be able to change that, and they can make those calls, it makes it a whole heck of a lot easier for policymakers. And I think in the long run, it makes it easier for budgeting too. So anyway, I wanted to add to what Supervisor Shirley said, just so you can hear our perspective. Yeah, we have, I think, 2 on here. So anyway, that's it. Any other questions for Administrator Witt or Audrey, formerly
Mr.
known as
Chair.
Aubrey?
Mr. Chair? Mr.
Yeah,
Chair?
yes, Mr. Fiedler. Go ahead.
I don't disagree with most of the remarks that were made by everybody tonight on this, but I do think we owe a lot of deference to the county administrator and the administrative head, human resources head they went through a very lengthy, thoughtful, adequate review of this. They consulted with the leadership teams, they consulted with employees, and they made a firm recommendation. And I think that we owe a lot of deference to that recommendation. And unless we feel very strongly about it, I don't know that we should reopen these things to make this an ongoing type of thing where we give some modest guidance to them to go back and review it. I think we either kind of disagree with it or we agree with it, and maybe say, come back next year if you've got any further thoughts on this, but don't make this something that's a black cloud hanging over their head for months and months into the future and having to redo what they've already done, unless we firmly disagree with the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fiedler, and I concur. We're not going to make this a black cloud over your head. So rest assured, we're not going to do that. We're looking at alternatives, and maybe we're going off topic a little bit, and we shouldn't be going down this any further. So based on your recommendation, I think we'll just hold still on taking any action on this particular piece. Any other questions for Audrey or Administrator Witt? Okay, thank you all very much. Going on to number 5, resolution transferring general fund unassigned fund balance to the health insurance fund.
So this is early. Normally we do fund balance transfers August or September after we've gotten the audit report completed. Hasn't been done. They've done field work, but we haven't even seen the preliminary yet on it. The issue I have though is next month is my deadline for you to approve some plan design changes for the health insurance fund. I forewarned you, we were looking at a bad year, 5 to 10% increase in health insurance. Well, the number came in and it was 23% increase in health insurance. Absolutely torpedoed my entire budget that I was looking at. So it makes this even more imperative though, that we make a fund balance transfer into the general fund. I'm really anticipating we'll probably be in the $3+ million range of fund balance that's available. So I feel very comfortable making this recommendation now, because there'll be more money left over for us to look at KIP or debt service or whatever else you want to use it for. But I need this piece put into place before I make my final plan design decisions on the health insurance next month, so that we can complete the budget in the time frame that we have. The $1.5 million, it's being used for two purposes. One is it's replenishing the fund balance. We had $1 million loss. So if that's an anomaly year, the $1 million goes back in, replenishes it. We're at our 25% fund balance policy for the health insurance fund. We're all good. If we end up with another big loss, well, that's not an anomaly anymore, that's a trend, and we'll have to continue to increase health insurance premiums. But the 23% increase we have would be 33% without 1 million of this transferred over. The other $500,000 then is related to the on-site clinic. So the on-site clinic, long-term, is supposed to stabilize our health insurance usage, but it really takes a couple of years to build up that on-site clinic usage. And based upon my analysis, I think we'll lose $500,000 in the first year that the on-site clinic opens up. Some of the vendors said we would save $500,000. I'm a little bit more conservative. I think we'll lose $500,000. So I'm building in that loss in with this also, because I think it's a 1-year loss, and then it sort of breaks even in year 2, and then it starts to save you money by year 3. And that's what we're looking at, would be a 3-year contract to give the on-site clinic a good start and solid analysis. So I'm asking for, really out of sequence though, this fund balance transfer now, so that we can finalize the rest of the plan design changes necessary to bring you still a balanced budget by the end of the summer.
Is there a motion to bring this to the table?
I'll move to approve the resolution transferring general fund unassigned fund balance to the health insurance fund.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second it.
Second.
Second.
Motion by Long, second by Counter. Discussion.
Just,
Mr. Chair. Did Bob Fiedler ask, or was he second? He was trying to second. Oh, okay. Supervisor Long.
real quick question. What happens if we don't do this?
Yeah, if you don't do this, what I have to look at with the health insurance premium rates, well, two things. One is I can continue to ignore it, and our $2 million fund balance, if we post another loss, could go down to 1 million or stay at 2 million, and it would be below fund balance target. So what we're doing is we're just plain really risky. And so that's not really where I want to be. The other thing we can do then is to increase the premiums, which would be my recommendation. You increase the premiums to rebuild the health insurance fund balance to where it's supposed to be. But $1 million is a 10% increase. And so that's where I said, if last year was an anomaly, this fixes that. We're all good moving forward. One-time thing, fixed it, we're good. If we post another $1 million loss, well, okay, now we've started a trend, and in 2026, I'm gonna have to add 10% on top of whatever we end up with for this year in order to stop that from happening ongoing. But I'd rather do that with, to go to 3 and fall back to 2 rather than stay at 2 and fall to 1 in the fund balance. At the end of the day, the county is gonna cover the bills. I mean, if you look back to 2011, the health insurance fund actually had a negative fund balance. And so that's not where I want to get. I really prefer to stay more financially solvent by the fund.
Any further questions? Supervisor Shirley?
The only issue that I see is the 500,000 for the clinic. Well, I personally agree that that's probably the direction we'll go. We haven't decided on it yet, so I'm kind of questioning whether we should include that now or do that as a separate fund balance transfer later.
Yeah, I mean, You can do the transfer later. Putting it into the health insurance fund doesn't restrict it to stay in that fund. You can always pull that money back out if you want to. And the clinic decision is really next month. So when we come in next month with our recommendation, the clinic is part of that recommendation because that's the time frame that we have to decide if there's an on-site clinic available. This is what we want to do with the other things with our benefits. If there's no on-site clinic, well, then we should probably do this differently with our health insurance options. So we need to know next month whether we're going to be doing the clinic or not doing the clinic.
I was just looking to see if we had talking about it later, but do we, since that's coming up next month, I guess I can ask that later at the end when we talk about future agenda items.
Well, if you ask for something under future agenda items, I won't be able to discuss it with you at all. So if it's health insurance related, I'd probably ask it now because it is related to this topic.
So my question is, we need a little more, I think, deep dive and more discussion on HSA plans versus our traditional plans. If we're going to make this decision on the clinic, then we need to have that with it too.
Yeah, we're still finalizing the details of what we're looking at, but the big picture of it is we're going to have two plan options still, a traditional option and the HSA. We only had about a 12% take rate on the HSA. We plan on making plan design alterations that make the HSA more attractive. The HSA will become even more attractive, though, with an on-site clinic option, which we will be recommending. The on-site clinic will be in our recommendation. We're also looking at structural plan design changes, really to what's covered, how much is covered, because that 23% increase that they've quoted me is unattainable. That's $2.3 million in the budget. I do not have that much money in the entire budget. So there will be changes to the health insurance plan design to get that number down to an attainable number. But the on-site clinic really, in the long term for us, based upon all our analysis, is going to help the county, and it will be part of our recommendation next month.
Any other questions? Any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion is approved. Number 6, consideration of reclassification request for behavioral health lead social worker to be a behavioral health supervisor 1. Audrey.
Okay, this one's a little confusing. And even rewriting it and rereading it, it's probably still a little confusing. So we already have behavioral health supervisors. And what I would like to do is basically create a behavioral health supervisor 1 and a behavioral health supervisor 2 position. The difference in this one than maybe other reclassifications is that I want all of the existing employees that are currently a behavioral health supervisor to be reclassified into the new behavioral health supervisor 2 role, but without changing their grade, without changing their job responsibilities, without changing their job description. So basically, it's just a retitling of their job. They're going to be a 2 instead of a 1 now. And then the new position would be the 1 classification, which would be very similar to a health and human services supervisor in the behavioral health department. The need for that request came from Shar and Natalie and Stephanie there in the behavioral health unit. Pretty much we are burning out our behavioral health supervisors. They're not lasting. The job is too big, it's too stressful. And we keep losing them because of that. And a lot of it has to do with the mental health crisis program and APS services. And APS used to be part of the ADRC. It was moved to behavioral health. We added a lead social worker position to that last year. We did a reclassification to add a lead, hoping that would take some responsibility off of the supervisor. It just hasn't done enough. So they would like to take that lead role and put it into a supervisory role so that they can actually help with performance reviews, supervising, training, development, things along the line that a supervisor would be responsible for versus just a lead having those responsibilities. And also then that new supervisor position could really help just supervise the areas of mental health crisis. And so that the other supervisors can focus on the other areas of behavioral health. And overall, it doesn't create a big cost deficit with the current lead promoting that person into the behavioral health supervisor 1 position. It would cost approximately $3,800, so a 5% increase to her current wages. Questions on that? Yes.
So there's a lot of turnover at these positions. Is that what I'm hearing, or how is this?
The behavioral health supervisor, the credentialing for that position based on DHS, so they have to have a clinical social worker license and a master's degree for DHS, and Bob can step in and correct me if I'm wrong, but to be able to provide clinical supervision to a majority of the positions within that area. So they have to have the 2 supervisors with that clinical background and master's degree. It's very hard to fill those positions. They've been open. When we do have openings, it takes us a very long time to fill them. And then when we do fill them, it seems like they get burnt out and they leave right away.
And that's a statutory requirement for the master's degree?
Yep, yes, to supervise a portion of behavioral health. So by adding this new position, it would take away those 2 requirements. It would be just a bachelor's degree and a social work license and supervisory experience as well. But that would still qualify. They could then support a section, so that mental health crisis area, those workers don't need that clinical supervision requirement. We also want to pool the FTE together so that if we do find magic unicorn that has the level 2, they can still hire 3 supervisors with that clinical experience. But we want to be able to open that pool of applicants further by limiting the education and the certifications needed for the position and still fall within DHS guidelines of what we need to have in the department. So it'll help with staffing the role in the future as well.
Is there a motion to bring this to the table?
I'll move to approve the consideration of the reclassification request.
Okay, there's a motion by Long. Is there a second?
Second?
Second by Fiedler. Discussion.
Yes.
Is there any discussion? Supervisor Shirley?
My question as I read through this was, this person in particular's job description is not changing. Just the title is changing and then moving the other people. So what's the purpose of doing it in the first place?
Yeah. So the lead social worker job description, that one is changing. So we're creating, so that position is now going to be a behavioral health supervisor and have pretty much, they share a job description. So the only thing that changes on there, I don't know if you guys can see that, but so there's the regular behavioral health supervisor role. And so that's everything that this new position is able to do. And then we pulled out the existing job duties that require that clinical license and master's degree. We pulled those responsibilities out and said only the 2s will be having those job responsibilities. So, and then we changed the education requirements on the job description too. So we're basically getting rid of the lead job description and putting it into a supervisor job description instead.
Any further questions? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution carries. Number 7, consideration of regrade request for placement of in-home therapist on wage grid.
So when we implemented the new wage grid on March 3rd, we had basically the in-home training, in-home therapists looked at their current grade placement compared to other therapists in the county and thought that it seemed unfair, that they were graded lower than some comparables. So I had several conversations with them and their supervisors about how that process worked. And I kind of explained that, we take the job descriptions that we have and we compare those to other counties and look for similarities within those job descriptions to determine the most comparable positions across our comparable counties. So they took a hard look at their job description, and that's where they had additional concerns, that their job description was outdated. It wasn't relevant anymore, that there was missing information about job duties that have been added since it was incepted. So I had them go through a full PDQ process. I had them all fill out a position description questionnaire. We built a new job description based off of their current job duties, had that approved by the department head, and then we took that new job description out to market again, just to be fair, to see, is it still going to place where it did under McGrath, or with the old, when we implemented the March wage grid, or would it change? And it did end up changing based on the new job description, and now it grades more with internal equity too. It's grading with all of the other therapists within the county. And so basically just asking for a regrade, a correction of that. Once again, it wouldn't have a budgetary impact, because we're just going to move them to the new grade that they should have been assigned to had we had the new job description on file at the time.
Is there a motion to bring this to the table?
I'll move to approve the consideration of the regrade request.
There's a motion by Supervisor Long. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Supervisor Counter. Discussion? Is there any discussion on this item? Is there any discussion on this item? Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion is approved. Number 8, resolution amending resolution and ordinance drafting policy.
Yeah, this, it's fairly routine in nature. We had an existing policy on the books about how resolutions and ordinances and cover memos should be drafted. It had a lot of references to the specific software that we were using. So I cleaned that up, I removed that, and made it generic that, the system the county uses will do this and do that. I also changed it to reflect some of our current practices that have probably just changed over time, to be reflective of it. But it's just an instructional policy to staff of what your expectation is of what you're going to see and when you want to see it. So if you're good with how the policy reads, that's what we're looking for.
Is there a motion for this resolution?
I'll make a motion for approving the resolution amending resolution and ordinance drafting policy.
Motion by Supervisor Counter. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And now a second by Supervisor Long. Discussion. Is there any discussion on this? Any-
Mr. Chairman, this is Bob.
Yes, Supervisor Fiedler, go ahead.
As I read through it, I think it all made eminent sense. I just had one very tiny thing, and my notes are a little bit discombobulated here, but if there is a B3D in this provision, then perhaps the word resolved had an issue with it. Maybe it's been corrected. There you go, resolved, just a misspelling. So that's an easy one. Just wanted to bring it to our attention. The second item was, I think this is a good policy overall, but it wasn't quite clear how this impacted the ability of an individual supervisor to prepare a resolution either for their committee or for the board. Perhaps the administrator could clarify that.
Yeah. Under B2, the county administrator shall direct the appropriate department head to compose and draft resolutions or ordinance languages. So basically, I'm your conduit to staff. So you say, hey, I want a resolution on this subject matter. I go, that sounds like that should be community development. I will have Jason do that for you. And then I'll tell the staff, this is what supervisor's looking for, prepare that and place it on the next agenda with approval of the chairman of that committee. So that's basically how it works, how it's supposed to work, how it does currently work. So.
I think that that's for what it covers, it's reasonable, but again, I would just go back to that requires the supervisor to go through you and then down to a department head if there is an appropriate one. But in the event that we had some other kind of, I'm just thinking, it seems to preclude supervisors from making resolutions or proposals that are other than through this very limited process. For example, I think elsewhere there was a suggestion that there be a 10-day period in which the resolution would have been prepared and made available. But my experience is that sometimes these things come up a little bit faster than that, and there isn't time to go through that process. But very often the resolution is fairly straightforward, and a supervisor prepares it and offers it. Is that being precluded by the language we're adopting here?
No, the language is should be submitted 10 days. That matches up with the general guidance for agenda packet preparation. Agendas are supposed to be out a week ahead of time. That's what your policy states. We don't always do that. We don't always quite meet that deadline. That's what we strive for. That's the deadline we give the staff. You know, like if I wanted my aunt to be at Thanksgiving dinner at 2 o'clock, I tell her to arrive at noon. That way she'll be on time. So, you know, we establish some deadlines and put them in there as targets to shoot for.
Let me try it one more way. Let's say a supervisor has an issue that they would like to put into the form of a resolution. And they go to the county chairman, and the chairman agrees it should be on the agenda. Using his discretion, he places it on the agenda. Is that going to be an appropriate thing for the county chair to do if he's approached by another supervisor?
County board chair, committee chair?
I'll say in this example, the county board chair.
Yeah, I think this policy says all resolutions have to come through one of the 5 standing committees. And so that's the practice. So again, this is a policy. It isn't a law. It's not in the county board rules. The rules really govern what you do. So the policy is a best direction of how things are supposed to work. So the way things are supposed to work is that somebody has an idea, they tell me what the idea is, I designate the appropriate person to draft that, it goes to a standing committee, and then it gets to the county board. So in a perfect world, that's how the policy lays out and that's how it's supposed to work. But again, it's a policy, it's not a law, it's not the county board rule, so there's probably quite a bit of flexibility in this.
Supervisor Fiedler, I think I'm going to rephrase what you have been asking. Does this stop a county board supervisor from going down that channel? Like going, here you go, Mr. Chairman Long, I want this resolution on having only pink extension cords in the county building. I want that on the next admin committee agenda to go to the county board. It doesn't stop that. They could write it. It never even has to touch you technically, right? It doesn't stop someone from doing it through that process.
Yeah. At the end of the day, The county board of supervisors can do what the county board of supervisors wants to do. I can wave this policy at you and go, well, you know, the policy says this, and you're gonna go, so what, Ken?
Right, as long
And
as
I'm
we're
gonna
within
go,
state
"All right."
statute. As
Yeah.
long as we're within
Yeah.
statute. Yeah, Supervisor Fiedler, I don't think it precludes a supervisor from bringing something directly to the chairman of the board to have it go down that path.
Well, based on the conversation we've had here and Ken clarifying that it's a policy and that there are the potential for individual supervisor to bring something to the attention of a chairman or the chairman of the board, I think that's satisfactory from my perspective.
Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution carries. Number 9, resolution amending county board compensation. Administrator Witt.
Yeah, I had noted that it's been a decade since we've taken a look at this, and I'm not saying that you have to change it. I'm just saying that since it's been so long since we have looked at it, that you might want to review it at this point in time. I did an analysis, and I think I included in here, of all the other counties around the state, of where they're at for compensation and where we rank with those and fit in with those. I think there's probably room for us to increase some of the per diems that we have for the chair, the vice chair, and for county board supervisors' attendance at meetings. The one caveat is that you can't give yourself a raise. You can only give your successor a raise, which includes if you get reelected. So this doesn't go into effect until 2026. A lot of times elected bodies will do this right before the nomination papers get circulated, which feels maybe just a little bit disingenuous because you know whether you're rerunning or not at that point. Right now, you guys have no idea what you're doing 2 years from now. And so now seems like a great time that you say, you know what, this position should be paid this amount. And in the next cycle, that's what they'll be paid, whether it's me or whether it's somebody else. So it gives you a lot more separation from it by doing it now. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to bring it up at this point in time rather than waiting maybe a year from now and doing it.
So, is there a motion for this resolution? Looking for a motion, Supervisor Shirley?
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution amending county board compensation.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Is there a
Second.
second? Second by Supervisor Fiedler. Discussion. Supervisor Long?
Well, I am adamantly against this. We're here to serve, we're not here to make money. And granted, the county board chair has taken, considerably more time than I ever expected. I don't want another $250 a month, or my successor, I don't think really should deserve that. And I go back again, I'll say it again, if anybody's wants to run because he thinks he's going to make more money, he's doing it for the wrong reason. We're here to serve, and there's too many people that are having a hard time, and for us to say, well, we're going to give ourselves a raise, not ourselves, but our positions, I think is very inappropriate, and I do not think this is a good idea at all.
Thank you, Supervisor Long. Are there any other discussions? Any other discussion? Supervisor Counter?
I'm in total agreement with Chairman Long on this particular one. Reasoning for being here is we're here looking out for our constituents. We're here looking to better our county, and there should be no other, the extra compensation, I don't think is necessary. Matter of fact, I think even where we're at is way plenty or even too much. I'd make a motion either, well, to,
There's a current motion on the floor,
Yeah.
so you could amend it,
Yeah,
but
you
you couldn't
can't.
table it from this point. Yep.
So we have a motion on the floor. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor of approving the pay increase for the next term signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no.
no,
No. All right, the noes have it. The resolution fails. With that, we go on to requests for future agenda items. Are there any requests for future agenda items? Supervisor Long.
I do. I'll reiterate the fact that I think our HR director did a fabulous job in her analysis with rewards and programs. But at the same time, I think that it would really be worthwhile now that we've had the wage grid in place for, 8 to 10 years? I think it might be also a worthwhile exercise to go through an analysis of its effectiveness, where it's working well, where maybe it's not working well. Are there adjustments or changes that we might be able to make to that wage grid? I don't think there's any pressure on this because obviously it's going to fall on your shoulders, Audrey. So pick away at it as you can, but at some point in the future, I would like to request that analysis be on the agenda.
Is that something that you would want to include in the administrator goals for the next year? I mean, that's coming up in August, September here. I mean, it's just a couple months away and then it would be over that next year then.
Yeah, I think that would be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a
All right.
good idea. Yeah.
I'll make note of that then.
Any other requests for future agenda items? Any other requests for future agenda items? Any other requests for future agenda items? Okay, how about any announcements and correspondence? Anything from anyone? Anything fun, exciting? Anything we should know? Anyone?
At the
Bueller?
July meeting, you will be the first committee on the new civic clerk system. So we're hoping it works. Mostly Amy.
All right, excellent. Any other announcements or correspondence? All right, hearing none, we will adjourn, and our next meeting is third Tuesday in July at 5 o'clock. And I don't have the date on that, but sounds right, because I think July 4th is a Thursday. So July 16th at 5 o'clock. All right, have a good night, everyone.